Hello and welcome back. sleepywhatsit here, and I have another miniatures video for you. This is going to be a little bit of a different one because I'm taking a VOD from a stream I did recently, and I'm just kind of cutting it down and giving a little bit of instructions since people have been asking about how I got the greens and such for this specific model. So what we're going to be looking at here today is a cave troll from Reaper Miniatures. This is the Bleached Black version of it from the Kickstarter 4. But it is available as a metal miniature. It is Cave Troll and number 3959. It's a very nice sculpt by Bobby Jackson. To my knowledge, the Bones Black version is not yet for sale, and I don't know when it's coming for sale. I apologize for the little palette cam up on the corner for the entirety of the video. Unfortunately, I did not record the raw footage for this since I was mostly just playing around with sketch style and wasn't intending on making a video from it. So I've actually had to go grab the VOD from Twitch and use that for video, so I apologize about that. Since we are going to be doing a sketch style mini here, one of the core components of this is our undercoat. Specifically, we want a really nice smooth zenithal undercoat, as you can see here. The way I achieved this was basing out in black from Vallejo in their primer, then doing gray from a 45-ish degree angle, and then doing white from directly on top. Very standard zenithal prime. This, I think, was one of the first models I did with my newer airbrush, and it came out super smooth, which is part of the reason why I decided to try doing sketch style with it. So one of the key components of doing sketch style is when we're painting the model, we don't want to be completely covering that undercoat that we have there. Instead, we want to be working more with glazes. So we want to be tinting the model as opposed to painting it. So to achieve this with Reaper paints, you're going to have to thin them down noticeably. The first paint that I put on the model that's going to be kind of our base color everywhere is Trollhide 9455. So I put a good amount of water in this. I'm wanting to say more than 1-to-1, obviously, something maybe like 2-to-1. Basically, you want to be mixing enough paint that's on the palette that it's kind of pulling back into itself instead of just kind of spreading out when you move it around. It's I wish I had a better example of like uptight on the camera that you could see exactly what this looks like, but you're going to be getting close to the range of what you're going to be doing a wash with. So that type of thinness. And then we dab a lot of it off on our paper towel. And then we, as I said, we just want to be tinting the model. So when we move it on, when we're putting the paint on the model, we want to avoid large pooling areas that are going to get out of control. So we put a little bit of the model and kind of spread it out and keep on working it out throughout the entire model. When doing this technique, like this style of glazing, because you're dabbing so much off of it, you'll probably want to put down more paint on your palette than you actually initially think, just because you kind of go through, because you're dabbing so much, right? You go through it much faster than you think you do, and it's kind of a pain to have to go and remix it partway through. But yeah, the key thing is to getting that consistency down and just kind of putting it on thinly. It's better to put it on too thinly and have to come back in and put another layer on later. So after basing out all of the skin areas, or I guess glazing out all of the skin areas using our Trollhide, I went in and did a bit of highlighting to the stomach because I wanted to kind of give it a little bit of a different, like the underbelly being a slightly different color than the rest of the skin. So I made a glaze out in Gnoll Pelt by Reaper, which is 9460, which is a slightly more yellow, greeny olive color, kind of a camo-y color, and worked it kind of across the stomach and just generally brought up the highlight in that area. It was already established from the zenithal, but I just want to kind of yellow it and make it stand out a little bit more. After getting the stomach a little bit brighter in color, I went in and started doing all of the kind of scales that I wanted to be a little bit of a darker color. I was originally, before when I got started on this, thinking of doing these in black, but I decided to tone it down a little bit and just go for more of a dark green brown color. Specifically, what I'm using here as a glaze is Swamp Green from Reaper, which is 9175. So I just made a glaze out of that, went over all of the areas that I thought needed to be dark, so that's all the kind of scale and warty bits. The triad that Swamp Green comes from, the camouflage green triad, the military green and camouflage green are probably good substitutions for Trollhide and Gnoll Pelt if you don't have access to them. Continuing on the glazing theme, I went in and detailed the teeth, which I based out using green ochre from Reaper, which is 9128. I will be coming back in a little bit later to do some more shading to get some of the details around the teeth a little bit more, so don't go too hard with this. Again, we're just trying to tint it. Next up is the claws, which is the first area that I painted using non-Reaper paint, though you probably could get away with using Reaper paints here. I specifically was using Glossy Black from Vallejo. Because we have to thin it down with so much water to get a nice glaze consistency, and I wasn't using like a gloss medium for this, I'm not sure using Glossy Black really did anything significant here because it kind of mats out once you thin it down. But yeah, working over the claws, almost all the claws kind of required 2 passes because the first pass makes them more of kind of a gray color and not really a black with shading. But because we have so much water and it kind of nicely falls down them, so you get kind of that nice gradient. But yeah, it's just black. You could probably use pure black or dragon black for Reaper for this. After dealing with all of his claws, the next step was to base out that big old jawbone he's wielding as a club. So I went back to my really core standard bone recipe here and based out using a glaze made out of desert sand by Reaper, which is 9432. So with all the basing out of the way, the next step was to do a little bit more shading and detail work on things like the teeth and the bone. So what I did was I took Agrax Earthshade from Citadel and mixed it in, I believe it was 2-to-1, maybe 3-to-1, a ton of Lamian medium in there to really thin it out, and then work that as a glaze/shade over all of those areas, making sure it was falling down into the crevices to give a little bit more definition of the detail. If you don't have Agrax Earthshade, any type of burnt umber, dark brown color could be turned into a shade or glaze using water to get a similar effect. But we're basically wanting to deepen the edges around the teeth and on the teeth on the bone and on the face. I also did a little bit more work with our troll hide here around the mouth just to kind of make sure that the lips and such were fully defined at this point. For this model, I was going for less of a cave troll and more of a swamp aquatic troll, so I initially didn't think how the bone came out was exactly the color I wanted. It was a little bit too dry desert going. So what I did is I used Athonian Camoshade from Citadel, again super cut down with Lamian medium to make another glaze/shade, which is kind of an olive color. It's very similar to the troll hide and some of the other colors that we have here, and ran that over the bone he's holding to give it kind of a more wet, mossy, damp feel. You can make a similar shade or wash out of any of the kind of greeny olive colors that we've already been working with if you don't have that specific color. So at this point, all we really have left to do is the eyes. As you can see on the palette, there's a little bit of red. I didn't actually end up using that. I attempted to do red for the eyes, which often I do for orcs, and I really didn't like how it looked. It was a little bit too contrasty for this. So I decided to go for more of a dulled white thing because of the swamp vibe. So the eye color was first painted in using Bleached Linen from Reaper 9436, which has been thinned down, not as much as the glazes we've been working with, but still thinned down from bottle consistency, and almost all of it dabbed off of the brush, and just with a careful, deft hand, just kind of lightly stroking from the side, touching the surface of the eye, trying not to flood the entire area around the eye, just getting that nice bright highlight on the eye itself. Just facing forward so it looks like there's something reflecting. And then after that had dried a little bit, I then went back in and took our black glaze and ran that around the eye socket to deepen it and to dull that white a little bit so it wasn't so stark and white standing out. So now that we have the entire model painted, I went back in and just kind of looked it over, looking for anywhere that I hadn't completely covered it, so there's a little bit of white showing through, and just going back in with the appropriate color and touching it up. Because we're working with thin glazes, you can do these little touch-ups without it completely, getting really dark if you're careful. And then for a lot of the body, the initial pass I made on the underside, which is more of a black tone, wasn't as heavy as it needed it to be because it was still reading very black. So a lot of the undersides, like under the arm, under the belly, things like that, I went through the base colors and such and just made sure that they were that there was a clear green tint to them. So I'm a big fan of sketch style. This is probably one of the first sketch style models that I've attempted that has turned out well as a sketch style paint job. Often with this technique, because it requires a very delicate hand and you get one shot at it, you can't really go back and unpaint sections of the model. I have a tendency to start trying to do sketch style. It kind of goes a little bit off the rail because my paint was too thick, and I just do a standard paint job following the shadows from the zenith undercoat for giving me guidance of where highlights and shadows should be. This is the first time that I've really leaned into that undercoating to get all of my highlights and shadows established. And because of the fact that you just kind of do one thin or two thin layers over everything, and there's not a lot of dry brush this, shade that, do layering here, it's a very fast technique. All in all, it took me about an hour and a half to paint this entire model on stream. I highly recommend trying this style, though it is a little bit more advanced, and it definitely requires a steady hand and a soft touch to do. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video informative. If you did, please give the video a like. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. I put out miniature videos semi-regularly. I also regularly stream on Twitch, which is where this project originally came from. That's over at twitch.tv/sleepywhatsit. I normally stream Saturday and Sunday morning. I post to Twitter and such if I'm going to be streaming other times. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you in the next one.